I was standing in the marble lobby of Romano Exotic Motors at 6:47 p.m. on Christmas Eve when I heard my father's voice echoing through the showroom like a sermon nobody asked to hear. Richard Sullivan never needed an invitation to hold court, especially when the topic was his children and especially when the subtext was my supposed failure. He was explaining to Frank Romano, the dealership owner, why his youngest daughter would never be able to afford anything on this floor. She drives a Honda older than her Stanford degree and thinks angel investing makes her an entrepreneur, he announced with the casual cruelty that had defined my childhood. Frank nodded politely, probably wondering why this man was volunteering family disappointments while standing in a cathedral of automotive desire. $12 million worth of machines gleamed under the spotlights, sculptures of steel, carbon fiber, and history. What my father didn't know, as he continued his impromptu performance about my failures, was that I owned every single vehicle he was admiring. The 1967 Porsche 911S that made him pause and run his fingers along its pristine chrome mine. The Ferrari F8 Tributo that burned under the lights like molten fire mine. The McLaren 720S Spider, the kind of engineering marvel most people only ever see in magazines. Mine. 26 vehicles in total, each one chosen not for its price tag but for the story it told about human innovation and passion. 3 years of careful building, investing, restoring, curating. While my family measured my worth by the age of my daily driver and the modesty of my apartment, I had been creating a collection that rivaled private museums. Tomorrow morning, every one of these cars would be delivered to my father's Greenwich mansion. The neighbors would watch phones raised, social media buzzing, and Richard Sullivan's understanding of success and failure would collapse like a house of cards in a hurricane. But in that moment, listening to him describe me as a disappointment to a man who had just watched me sign agreements worth more than most people see in a lifetime, I felt something unexpected. Not the vengeful satisfaction I thought I craved. Something quieter, something stronger, peace. For the first time in 30 years, I didn't need my father to recognize my worth. Tomorrow would change everything, yes, but tonight, I realized I had already won. A few hours earlier, the familiar streets of Greenwich blurred past my windshield as I gripped the steering wheel of my 2015 Honda Civic tighter than necessary. Christmas Eve 2024, and I was driving back to a house that had stopped feeling like home years ago. The leather seats, worn smooth from nearly a decade of service, creaked with each turn as I navigated roads lined with estates that cost more than most people earned in a lifetime. My phone buzzed through the car speakers, Sophie's name lighting up the dashboard. I tapped accept, grateful for the distraction. Ready for tomorrow's family drama? Her voice carried that mix of concern and mischief I had grown to love over the 6 months we'd been secretly dating. As ready as I'll ever be, I said, signaling into the neighborhood where every house tried to outshine the next in sheer ostentation. You know you don't have to prove anything to them, right? Sophie's tone softened. You've built something incredible, Caitlin. Stanford computer science graduate at 20, co-founded CloudSync, sold it to Microsoft for $50 million. That's not exactly failure material. I let out a dry laugh. Try telling that to Richard Sullivan. In his world, success isn't real unless it can be parked in your driveway. The Sullivan estate came into view, and my stomach clenched with familiar dread. $3.2 million of Connecticut colonial perfection, manicured within an inch of its life. But it wasn't the house that made my chest tighten. It was the lineup of vehicles in the circular driveway, each one a status symbol broadcasting its owner's achievements. David's BMW X7 all-aggressive angles in corporate triumph. Jessica's Porsche Cayenne sleek and smug. Brad's Mercedes G-Wagon hulking like an armored fortress. I parked my Civic off to the side, its humble frame practically swallowed by their chrome and polish. For a moment I just sat there staring. The quiet hum of the engine, the faint scent of worn leather, the ghost of another memory, my grandfather Bob's garage, the steady scrape of his tools, the low whistle he always carried as background music to his work. The way he'd crouched beside me when I was 16, guiding my hands over the frame of a battered 1967 Porsche 911S we were restoring together. My mind drifts back 5 years to Christmas 2019, the last time Grandpa Bob was alive to celebrate with us. He'd pulled me aside in his garage that day, away from the family chaos. His hands, weathered from decades of working on engines, guided mine as we adjusted the carburetor. True worth isn't about what others see, Katie, he'd told me, his voice patient but firm. It's about what you build when no one's watching. Your father builds buildings because he needs everyone to see how successful he is. But you build things that matter. Don't ever let them convince you otherwise. I'd treasured those words, even more so after he passed away just 3 months later. What I hadn't known then was that he'd left me something that would change everything. Something that would prove his faith in me was more than just the blind love of a doting grandfather. He'd been the only one who understood me. And when he died in 2019, it felt like the last thread connecting me to this family had snapped. A text buzzed across my screen, Sophie again. The calm before the storm, I smiled faintly and typed back, exactly. Pocketing my phone, grabbing my small overnight bag from the passenger seat, I steel myself for what's coming. I climbed out of the Civic and faced the sprawling estate. 2 years since I'd last spent Christmas here. 2 years since I'd endured the measuring glances, the subtle digs, the outright dismissals. 2 years of letting them believe their youngest daughter is still the family, disappointment driving her cheap car and living her small life. I took a deep breath, squared my shoulders, and walked toward the door. Whatever storm waited inside, I was ready. I locked the Honda and walked toward the front door, my footsteps crunching on the pristine gravel driveway. The massive oak door with its elaborate Christmas wreath opens before I can even ring the bell. My mother, Margaret Sullivan, stands in the doorway wearing her signature pearls and a smile that doesn't quite reach her eyes. "Caitlin, sweetheart, you made it." Her gaze immediately shifts past me to my car, and I watch her expression tighten almost imperceptibly. Still driving that little car, I see. "Hello, Mom. Merry Christmas Eve." She steps aside to let me in, and I'm immediately enveloped by the scent of expensive candles and my mother's Chanel perfume. The foyer stretches up 2 stories, dominated by a Christmas tree that probably cost more than most people's holiday budget. Voices drift from the living room, punctuated by the occasional burst of laughter. "Your father is in his study," she says, straightening an already perfect ornament on the tree. "He's been looking forward to seeing you." I doubt that's entirely true, but I nod anyway. The familiar weight of this house settles on my shoulders like an old coat that never quite fits right. In a few hours, I'll sit down to Christmas dinner and endure another evening of subtle jabs about my choices, my car, my apparently directionless life. But they have no idea what's coming on Boxing Day morning. I climb the stairs toward my old room, each step taking me further from the Honda Civic in the driveway and closer to a reckoning that's been 3 years in the making. Tomorrow morning, Frank Romano's delivery trucks will arrive with a convoy that will change everything my family thinks they know about success, about worth, and about their supposedly unsuccessful youngest daughter. For tonight, though, I'm still just Katie with the cheap car and the disappointing life choices. Tomorrow, they'll learn the truth about what I've been building when no one was watching. I haven't even finished setting my bag down in the foyer when my father's voice cuts through the holiday warmth like a blade through silk. Still driving that embarrassment, I see. "Your siblings understand the importance of image." Richard Sullivan stands in the doorway to his study, all 58 years of him radiating the kind of confidence that comes from building a $15 million real estate empire from nothing. His steel gray hair is perfectly styled. His cashmere sweater probably costs more than most people spend on groceries in a month, and his disapproval of my transportation choices is written across his face in bold letters. "Hello to you too, Dad. Merry Christmas Eve." My mother appears beside him, her smile strained as she glances toward the window where my Honda sits among the luxury vehicles like a sparrow in a nest of peacocks. "Oh, honey, we just worry about what people think when they see you in that thing." She can't even bring herself to call it a car. The living room erupts in voices as my siblings realize I've arrived. David emerges first, his 6-foot frame filling the archway, looking every inch the successful Manhattan attorney in his perfectly pressed khakis and button-down shirt. Even on Christmas Eve, he dresses like he might need to rush to court at any moment. "Katie, look who finally decided to grace us with her presence." He wraps me in a hug that feels genuine, and for a moment, the tension eases. "Made partner at Cravath, Swain & Moore 6 months ago," he adds, because David has never been able to let a conversation pass without mentioning his achievements. Jessica appears next, her blonde hair styled in effortless waves that probably took an hour to perfect. She's wearing designer jeans and a cashmere sweater that costs more than my monthly rent, and she hugs me with the careful precision of someone who doesn't want to wrinkle her outfit. "So good to see you, sweetie." I just launched a campaign for Hermes. It's been absolutely insane, but in the best way. Behind her lurks Brad, her investment banker husband, all sharp suits and sharper ambition. He gives me a perfunctory handshake and immediately launches into a story about his latest deal. The kind of man who measures success in zeros and thinks everyone else should, too. "So what have you been up to?" David asks, settling into one of the leather armchairs that probably cost more than my car. Still doing the startup thing. I'm angel investing now, I say simply, because it's easier than explaining the complex reality of my situation. My father snorts from across the room. Playing with other people's money isn't building anything real, Caitlin. When are you going to start a proper business? Something tangible, the familiar knot, forms in my stomach. The one that appears every time I'm in this house, surrounded by these people who love me but don't understand me. Before I can respond, a small voice cuts through the adult tension, like sunshine breaking through storm clouds. Aunt Katie, Emma Sullivan. David's 8-year-old daughter barrels into the room with the uncontainable energy that only children possess. She throws her arms around my waist and suddenly everything else fades away. This is why I came home. Not for my father's approval or my siblings' understanding, but for this little girl who sees the world with eyes unclouded by prejudice and expectation. I missed you. Did you bring your cool car? Daddy says it's old, but I think it looks like it has stories. I kneel down to her level, ignoring the way my family exchanges glances over my head. It does have stories, Em. Lots of them. Maybe tomorrow I'll tell you some. From across the room, I catch sight of the Christmas tree, and my heart sinks a little more. Underneath, wrapped in expensive paper and topped with elaborate bows, are presents clearly marked for David and Jessica. Large boxes, small boxes, all of them screaming money and thoughtfulness, and they're almost hidden behind the larger gifts is a small, practical package with my name on it. I don't need to open it to know it's something useful and inexpensive, chosen with obligation rather than love. Emma follows my gaze and wrinkles her nose. Grandpa says you don't care about fancy things, so they got you something practical. But I made you something special. It's upstairs in my room. That's my girl, I whisper, and her face lights up like she's just been given the greatest compliment in the world. My father clears his throat, the sound cutting through our moment like a judge's gavel. Caitlin, could I speak with you privately for a moment? The others continue their conversations, but I can feel their attention on us as I follow him into his study. The room smells of leather and expensive whiskey, lined with awards and photos documenting his rise from construction worker to real estate mogul. His desk, massive and imposing, dominates the space like a throne. He closes the door and turns to face me, his expression serious. I hope you'll consider your image tomorrow. We have important guests coming for Christmas dinner. Business associates, your mother's social circle. People who matter. The words hit me like physical blows, each one carefully chosen to remind me of my place in this family hierarchy. I want to tell him that I matter too, that my choices in my life have value even if they don't look like his definition of success. Instead, I just nod. Try not to embarrass us, he continues, and there it is. The thing that's been hanging between us for years finally spoken aloud. In his world, my existence is an embarrassment. My choice is a reflection of his failure as a father. I'll do my best, I manage to say, though the words taste like ash in my mouth. My phone buzzes in my pocket and I pull it out reflexively. The message from Frank Romano makes my pulse quicken. Fleet inspection complete. Everything ready for Boxing Day delivery per your instructions. I slide the phone back into my pocket and look at my father. Really look at him. This man who built an empire from nothing, who commands respect in boardrooms across Connecticut, who measures worth in dollars and status symbols. Tomorrow morning, he's going to learn that his embarrassing youngest daughter has been building something too, something he never saw coming. Good, he says, apparently satisfied with my compliance. Your mother has spent weeks planning this dinner. Don't let her down. He opens the door and the sounds of family conversation drift back in. David is holding court with some story about a difficult client. Jessica is showing photos from her latest campaign on her phone. And Emma is arranging and rearranging the presents under the tree with the serious concentration of a master architect. I won't let her down, I tell him. And for the first time since I arrived, I mean every word. Because tomorrow morning everything changes. Tomorrow they'll see what I've been building when no one was watching. Tomorrow, the daughter who embarrasses them will show them what real success looks like. But tonight, I'm still just the family disappointment with the cheap car and the impractical dreams. I rejoin the conversation, smile at the appropriate moments, and let my family continue believing they know who I am and what I'm worth. In less than 18 hours, that comfortable illusion will shatter like crystal hitting concrete. I can hardly wait. Christmas dinner at the Sullivan house is always a performance, and tonight we have a full audience. 23 people crowd around the extended dining table, a mix of extended family and my father's business associates, all dressed in their holiday finest and ready to showcase their success like peacocks displaying their plumage. The conversation flows like expensive wine, each person taking their turn to share their latest achievements. Cousin Michael, who works in finance, regales the table with stories about his new Lamborghini Huracan, describing its acceleration with the passion most people reserve for discussing their children. Uncle James follows with updates on his Hamptons vacation home renovation, dropping the contractor's fee into casual conversation like it's nothing more than pocket change. David commands attention with his recent victory in a high-profile corporate lawsuit, his voice carrying across the table as he describes outmaneuvering opposing counsel. The business associates nod approvingly, recognizing the performance for what it is. Everyone here understands the game. Success must be visible, measurable, enviable. I sit quietly cutting my prime rib into small, precise pieces, watching the social dynamics unfold around me. This is theater, each person playing their role in a production where worth is measured in dollars and status symbols. I've seen this show my entire life, always from the audience, never invited on stage. My father stands, raising his crystal wine glass toward the chandelier that probably costs more than most people's cars. The conversations die as attention turns to him, the patriarch ready to hold court. To family achievements and those who understand that success should be visible, he begins, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being heard. His eyes sweep around the table, lingering on David and Jessica with obvious pride, before settling on me with something that isn't quite disappointment but isn't approval either. And to those still finding their way, the pause before those last words lands like a stone in still water, sending ripples of awareness through the gathered family. Everyone knows exactly who he's referring to. A few people glance in my direction, their expressions mixing pity with curiosity. Glasses clink around the table and conversations resume, but I feel the weight of judgment settling on my shoulders like a heavy coat. This is my place in the family narrative, the lost sheep, the cautionary tale, the daughter who didn't quite live up to her potential. So Caitlin, one of my father's business partners, a man named Robert Whitman who owns half the commercial real estate in Stamford, turns his attention to me. Richard tells me you're in technology. What exactly do you do? My father shifts uncomfortably, clearly unprepared for direct questions about his least successful child. She's in technology consulting, he says, the words coming out stiff and rehearsed. Jessica jumps in her rescue attempt, making things worse. She's very humble about it, sometimes too humble. Her smile is sharp around the edges, a subtle dig wrapped in sisterly concern. She's always been good at that, delivering criticism that sounds like care. Before I can respond, my phone buzzes against my leg. Sophie's name appears on the screen, and I feel a rush of gratitude for the interruption. Excuse me, I need to take this. It's work-related. I step away from the table, moving toward the kitchen, where the catering staff busily prepare the next course. The conversation continues behind me, but I can feel eyes following my movement, curious about what kind of work emergency could interrupt Christmas dinner. Collection secured. Sophie's voice is warm with anticipation when I answer. Perfect timing confirmed, I reply, keeping my voice low. Tomorrow morning at 8. I can't wait to see their faces, she says, and I can hear the smile in her voice. Are you holding up okay in there? Same old performance, different year. But after tomorrow, things change. I love you, Katie. Remember that when things get rough tonight. The words settle around my heart like a warm blanket. I love you too. I'll call you later. When I return to the dining room, the conversation has moved on to vacation plans and investment strategies, but I catch several people exchanging glances. My mother looks concerned, probably wondering if I'm having relationship troubles or financial difficulties. In their world, mysterious phone calls during family dinner suggest crisis, not success. I slide back into my seat just as Emma, who's been unusually quiet during the adult conversation, leans toward me with the complete lack of filter that makes children both dangerous and wonderful. Aunt Katie, are you really getting new cars tomorrow? Her voice carries clearly across the table, cutting through the sophisticated chatter like a fire alarm. The adults laugh, that indulgent sound people make when children say something amusing and impossible. Michael ruffles her hair. What kind of cars? Sweetheart Ferraris, Lamborghinis? Emma nods seriously. Really expensive ones. Aunt Katie told me her car has stories, but tomorrow she's getting cars with even better stories. I catch her eye and wink. We'll see what Santa brings, sweetheart. The laughter continues, everyone clearly charmed by the child's imagination. My father shakes his head with paternal affection. Children and their fantasies. Emma probably heard something on television. But Emma doesn't let it drop. She looks right at me, her 8-year-old eyes bright with conspiracy and absolute certainty. You promised to tell me their stories tomorrow morning. Remember, the conversation moves on, but I notice a few people watching me with renewed curiosity. Children often know things adults miss, and Emma's confidence is hard to dismiss completely. Still, the idea that I could own multiple expensive cars is so far outside their understanding of who I am that it remains safely in the realm of childhood fantasy. As the evening progresses, the comments become more pointed. Aunt Patricia mentions her neighbor's daughter who just bought a house in Manhattan. Cousin Sarah talks about her son's promotion at Goldman Sachs. Each story feels carefully chosen, designed to highlight what I'm not achieving, what I'm not becoming, what I'm not contributing to the family legacy. Career direction becomes a recurring theme. Uncle James asks about my 5-year plan. Robert Whitman suggests I might benefit from networking within his commercial real estate circles. Even Jessica offers to introduce me to contacts in luxury marketing, as if the solution to my apparent lack of ambition is simply meeting the right people. The phrase wasted potential hovers over the conversation like smoke from a dying fire. No one says it directly, but it's there in every suggestion, every piece of advice, every concerned glance between the adults who've known me since childhood. They mean well, I know that. In their minds, they're trying to help the family member who's clearly struggling to find her way. But sitting here surrounded by their good intentions and gentle condescension, I feel like an actress who's forgotten her lines in a play where everyone else knows the script by heart. Tomorrow morning, the script changes. Tomorrow, they discover that their struggling, directionless, disappointingly humble daughter has been writing her own story all along. Tonight, though, I smile and nod and let them continue believing they understand my life. The dessert course arrives, and with it, more stories of success and achievement. I eat my creme brulee and count the hours until 8 a.m., when 23 luxury cars will arrive to rewrite everything my family thinks they know about Worth's success and their supposedly lost daughter. After dinner, the gathering moves to the living room where my father takes his position, behind the mahogany bar cart, pouring measures of 25-year-old Macallan into crystal tumblers. The ritual of expensive whiskey is sacred in this house, another way to demonstrate that the Sullivans have arrived and intend to stay at the top. The conversation continues its familiar rhythm of achievement and acquisition. Robert Whitman settles into the leather sofa, swirling his whiskey thoughtfully. I was just at a client's house in Westchester last week. Incredible car collection. 3 Ferraris, a couple of Lamborghinis, vintage Porsches. Must have been worth millions. My father nods approvingly. Must be nice to afford such luxuries. Some of us are still working toward that level. His tone suggests he's close to achieving such heights, but the glance in my direction makes it clear I'm not part of that ambitious trajectory. I sip my whiskey and feel its burn match the heat building in my chest. Every word, every casual observation feels carefully chosen to highlight my deficiencies. They don't mean to be cruel, I tell myself. This is just how they communicate, measuring worth through possessions and public displays of success. David leans back in his chair, gesturing with his glass. You know, Katie went to Stanford, computer science, graduated summa cum laude, all that Ivy League training, and what does she have to show for it? 10-year-old Honda. The extended family chuckles uncomfortably, caught between loyalty and truth. They love me, but they also can't deny the evidence of their own eyes. In their world, education is supposed to translate directly into visible prosperity. My failure to display wealth is proof that something went wrong along the way. The whiskey sits heavy in my stomach, mixing with years of accumulated hurt. These people raised me, celebrated my achievements, and attended my graduation. But somehow, none of that matters as much as what I drive or where I live or how successfully I perform prosperity for their benefit. My father moves to the center of the room, commanding attention as naturally as he breathes. The whiskey has loosened his tongue, and I can see in his expression that he's building toward something. The room falls quiet, sensing a moment approaching. You know, I'm genuinely embarrassed when my business associates ask about all 3 of my children. His voice carries clearly through the sudden silence. David's partnership at Cravath, one of the most prestigious law firms in Manhattan. Jessica's success in luxury marketing, working with brands that define elegance and sophistication. He pauses, and I feel every eye in the room turn toward me. My heart starts racing, blood pounding in my ears as I realize where this is heading. Then I have to explain why my youngest daughter drives a car older than some people's marriages and lives, like she's still in college. The words hit me like physical blows, each one precisely aimed to cause maximum damage. The room falls into the kind of silence that follows car accidents, when everyone knows something terrible has happened but no one quite knows how to respond. My hands start shaking, and I press them flat against my thighs to hide the tremor. 30 years old, and my father just announced to a room full of family and business associates that I'm an embarrassment to him, that my existence diminishes his carefully constructed image of success. A memory surfaces unbidden, sharp and clear despite the whiskey fog in my brain. 5 years ago, Christmas 2019, the last time Grandpa Bob was alive to buffer these family gatherings. I'd found him in his garage as usual, bent over the engine of his 1967 Porsche 911S. The man who taught me that cars were more than transportation, that they were art and engineering and passion made manifest. When they finally see the truth, Katie, he'd said, his weathered hands steady on the wrench, make sure it's spectacular. Not for revenge, for justice. I hadn't understood what he meant then. I thought he was talking about some abstract future where my family would appreciate my choices. But sitting here, feeling the weight of their pity and disappointment pressing down on me like a physical force, I finally understand. This isn't about proving them wrong. It's about proving myself right. I stand carefully, my legs unsteady beneath me. The whiskey, the emotion, the years of accumulated hurt all mixed together in my bloodstream. Excuse me, I need some air. I walk through the French doors onto the terrace, grateful for the bite of December air against my flushed cheeks. The sounds of the party continue behind me, muffled by glass and distance. Someone laughs, probably trying to ease the tension my father's words created. My phone feels heavy in my hands as I scroll to Frank Romano's number. He answers on the second ring, his voice warm and familiar. "Frank, it's time. Full fleet delivery tomorrow morning, 8 a.m. sharp." There's a pause on the other end of the line. "You sure about this, Caitlin?" Once this happens, there's no going back to invisible. I've been invisible long enough. The words come out steadier than I feel, carrying the weight of 3 years of careful planning and patience. Tomorrow morning, my father will learn what his embarrassing daughter has been building while he was busy being embarrassed by her. All right then. 23 vehicles, climate-controlled transport, full documentation. Your neighbors are going to have quite the show. I'm about to hang up when I hear small footsteps behind me. Emma appears at my elbow, her 8-year-old face serious in the way children get when they sense adult drama they don't fully understand. Are the cars really coming tomorrow? Aunt Katie? I kneel down to her level, studying her face in the light spilling from the house. This little girl has been the bright spot in every family gathering, the one person who loves me without conditions or expectations. It's our secret, okay, Em? She nods solemnly, her expression far too mature for her age. Grown-ups don't listen to kids anyway. But I heard what Grandpa said there. It wasn't very nice, no, sweetheart, it wasn't very nice. She wraps her small arms around my neck, and for a moment, the hurt in my chest eases slightly. Tomorrow morning, I'll show them all what their embarrassing daughter has been building in the shadows. But tonight, this hug from the only family member who sees my worth beyond my possessions is enough to carry me through. Are the cars going to be pretty? Emma whispers against my ear. I pull back to look at her, managing a smile that feels real for the first time all evening. Very pretty. And they all have stories just like I promised. We stand together in the December cold, her small hand warm in mine, and I realize this moment matters more than all the luxury cars arriving tomorrow. Emma doesn't care about my net worth or my investment portfolio. She doesn't measure my success by the vehicle I drive or the apartment I rent. She loves me because I listen to her stories about school, because I remember her favorite ice cream flavor, because I treat her like a whole person instead of a miniature adult. The irony isn't lost on me. Tomorrow I'll prove my financial worth to people who should love me unconditionally, while the one person who already does is 8 years old and thinks my Honda Civic is perfectly fine because it brought me home to her. Maybe that's what Grandpa Bob really meant about justice. Not proving them wrong, but proving to myself that I deserve better than their conditional love. Tomorrow isn't just about revealing my success. It's about reclaiming my dignity. The drive back to my Stamford apartment takes 30 minutes, but it feels like crossing into another universe. I trade the manicured perfection of Greenwich for the honest simplicity of my one-bedroom rental, where the furniture came from West Elm instead of Italian designers and the art on the walls costs hundreds, not thousands. I pour myself a glass of wine and open my laptop, the familiar glow filling the quiet space. Numbers never lie, unlike family dinner conversations. And tonight I need the comfort of objective reality. My Schwab account shows the current balance $73.2 million spread across investment accounts, real estate holdings, and liquid assets. All of it structured through various LLCs and trusts, exactly as my attorney James Harrison recommended. CloudSync Technologies LLC shows the final Microsoft acquisition payment, $50 million deposited March 15, 2021. 3 years, 8 months, and 9 days ago. The day my life changed forever, though my family still has no idea. I scroll through my investment portfolio, watching the real-time updates of my angel investing activities. 35 million in carefully chosen startups, most of them founded by people like me who understand that building something meaningful matters more than building something flashy. My real estate holdings show 8 million in value, including a small apartment building in Hartford and several commercial properties managed through shell corporations. And then there's the collection. $12 million in automotive art, each vehicle chosen for its engineering significance, its racing heritage, its place in the evolution of human craftsmanship. Not toys for showing off, but investments in passion made tangible. The numbers blur as my mind drifts backward, 5 years to a cramped studio apartment near Stanford where everything began. I was 20 years old, fresh out of computer science with summa cum laude honors, that my father barely acknowledged because I'd chosen technology over business or law. At a weekend hackathon in San Francisco, I met Marcus Chen, a brilliant programmer with an idea for cloud synchronization that could revolutionize how businesses handle data. We built the prototype in 72 sleepless hours, surviving on energy drinks and shared ambition. CloudSync was born at that moment, though neither of us imagined it would eventually employ 300 people and revolutionize enterprise software. The early years blur together in a montage of 18-hour days, ramen noodles, and sleeping on office couches. While my siblings collected designer clothes and luxury cars, I collected lines of code and investor meetings. My family saw my lifestyle and assumed failure. They couldn't imagine that I was choosing simplicity over ostentation, that every dollar saved was a dollar invested in building something revolutionary. Grandpa Bob's death in December 2019 shattered more than just my heart. The reading of his will revealed a trust fund worth $2.7 million, left specifically to me with a letter that still brings tears to my eyes. Katie understands that true value doesn't need an audience. Build something that matters, not something that impresses. He'd been quietly saving and investing for decades, living modestly while accumulating real wealth, just like I was learning to do. That inheritance became the bridge financing CloudSync needed for our final push toward acquisition. Microsoft approached us in January 2021, and by March, Marcus and I were $50 million richer. He bought a mansion in Palo Alto and a collection of supercars that he shows off on social media. I bought a Honda Civic and started angel investing. The apartment door opens and Sophie's voice fills the quiet space. Katie, I brought General Tso's chicken and lo mein, comfort food for the night before everything changes. She sets the takeout containers on my small dining table, and I close the laptop. Sophie Chen came into my life through assignment, not accident. She was researching a story about Silicon Valley's secret collectors, entrepreneurs who built massive car collections away from public attention. Frank Romano connected us, thinking I might have insights into the psychology of discreet wealth. Our first interview lasted 4 hours and ended with dinner. Our second meeting was officially a follow-up, but really an excuse to spend more time together. 6 months later, she knows my collection better than some museum curators know theirs. I've documented your entire fleet for the article, she says, opening the containers and filling the apartment with the smell of garlic and ginger. Your father's going to realize his failure. Daughter owns more automotive art than most museums. It's not about proving him wrong, I tell her, accepting the chopsticks she offers. It's about proving myself right. For 30 years, I've let them define success for me. Tomorrow, I take that power back. We plan the logistics over Chinese food and wine. Frank's team will arrive at 8 a.m. sharp with specialized transporters, each vehicle secured and documented for insurance purposes. Sophie will be positioned to photograph the family's reactions, capturing the moment when their understanding of reality shifts permanently. I'll be prepared for whatever emotional fallout follows. The evening light fades as we talk, and Sophie reaches across the table to touch my hand. Are you ready for this? Once it happens, there's no going back. Your relationship with your family will never be the same. I look around my modest apartment at the life I've built on my own terms. On the bookshelf sits a framed photo from childhood, one of dozens taken at various family gatherings over the years. In every single one, David and Jessica are posed proudly in the center while I hover in the background, smaller and somehow less significant in the frame. Tomorrow changes everything I say, and the words feel like a promise I'm making to that little girl who always stood in the shadows. Sophie squeezes my hand, and I realize that regardless of what happens with my family, I'm not alone anymore. I have someone who sees my worth without needing proof, who loves me for who I am rather than what I own. Tomorrow's revelation isn't about gaining their approval. It's about no longer needing it. The clock on my wall shows 11:47 p.m. In 8 hours and 13 minutes, 23 luxury vehicles will arrive to rewrite my family's understanding of success, wealth, and their supposedly disappointing daughter. I'm finally ready to step out of the shadows and into the light. I walk to my bedroom and pull out a small wooden box from the back of my dresser drawer. Inside, wrapped in tissue paper, is Grandpa Bob's final gift to me. Not the trust fund, not the inheritance paperwork, but something far more valuable. A small brass key attached to a leather keychain worn smooth by decades of use. The key to his 1967 Porsche 911S. He'd pressed it into my palm during our last conversation, 3 days before the heart attack that took him. "This car has been waiting for someone who understands what it really means," he'd whispered, his weathered hands covering mine. "Not transportation, Katie. Legacy. When you're ready to stop hiding who you are, she'll be ready to show the world who you've become." I'd kept the Porsche in climate-controlled storage for 5 years, visiting it monthly like a shrine. Frank Romano had offered to include it in my collection display dozens of times, but I'd always refused. That car was too personal, too sacred to use as a prop in family drama. But tomorrow is different. Tomorrow isn't about showing off or proving points. It's about honoring the man who believed in me when nobody else did, who saw my potential when my own father saw only disappointment. I close the box and return it to its hiding place. The Porsche will lead the convoy tomorrow morning. First off, the transport truck, positioned front and center in a driveway that was never expected to host automotive history. Grandpa Bob's final lesson in the difference between cost and value, between owning something and earning it. Sophie notices my expression when I return to the living room. "What are you thinking about?" "Family legacy," I say, "and how sometimes it skips a generation." They say money talks, but in my family it screams. It announces itself in Italian leather shoes that cost more than most people's rent, in watches that tick away time worth more per second than minimum wage workers make in an hour. It declares its presence through charity galas where tax-deductible generosity gets photographed for society pages, through country club memberships that cost more annually than a college education. But tonight, sitting in this hired Mercedes-Benz sedan that I deliberately chose instead of my own transportation, I understand something my family never taught me about wealth. The loudest money is often the emptiest, the most desperate to be seen, heard, acknowledged. It performs because it fears being forgotten, ignored, dismissed as insufficient. Real wealth, I've learned, doesn't need an audience. The irony tastes bitter on my tongue as Greenwich's pristine streets roll past my window. I'm about to walk into a house where my worth will be measured by the age of my vehicle, the modesty of my apartment, and the apparent smallness of my ambitions. They'll see failure where I've built an empire, poverty where I've accumulated abundance, shame where I've found purpose. Tomorrow morning will change that forever, but tonight, one last time, I'll let them believe their story about me. The daughter who never quite measured up, who chose the wrong path, who disappointed them simply by refusing to perform wealth the way they perform it. My phone glows with messages from the only person who knows the truth about what's coming. But even Sophie doesn't fully understand what this moment means. She sees it as vindication, as proof, as justice served cold on a silver platter. For me, it's something deeper. It's the final break from needing their approval, their recognition, their conditional love that comes wrapped in expectations I never asked to carry. The car turns onto Maple Ridge Drive, and I see the familiar glow of Christmas lights outlining the house where I learned that love could be earned, lost, and withheld based on performance metrics, where I discovered that family doesn't always mean belonging. But I also learned something else in that house, something they never intended to teach me. I learned that sometimes the greatest gift you can give yourself is the freedom to stop caring what other people think of your choices. Tonight is my last performance as their disappointment. Tomorrow, I take my final bow and step into the life I've been building in the shadows, while they were busy being embarrassed by me. The Mercedes pulls into the circular driveway and I take a deep breath. The familiar streets of Greenwich blur past my windshield as I grip the steering wheel of my 2015 Honda Civic a little tighter than necessary. Christmas Eve 2024, and I'm driving back to a house that stopped feeling like home years ago. The leather seats, worn smooth from 9 years of faithful service, creak slightly as I navigate the winding roads lined with mansions that cost more than most people make in a lifetime. My phone buzzes through the car speakers, and Sophie's name lights up the dashboard display. I tap accept, grateful for the distraction, ready for tomorrow's family drama. Her voice carries that mix of concern and amusement I've grown to love over the past 6 months. We've been secretly dating. As ready as I'll ever be, I reply, signaling into the familiar neighborhood where every house tries to outdo its neighbor in sheer ostentation. You know you don't have to prove anything to them, right? Sophie's tone softens. You've built something incredible, Caitlin. Stanford computer science graduate at 20, co-founded a tech startup that changed how businesses handle cloud. Synchronization sold it to Microsoft for $50 million 3 years ago. That's not exactly failure material. I let out a dry laugh. Try telling that to Richard Sullivan. In his world, success isn't real unless everyone can see it parked in your driveway. The Sullivan family estate comes into view, and my stomach clenches with familiar dread. $3.2 million of Connecticut colonial architecture sprawling across manicured grounds that probably cost more to maintain monthly than most people's rent, but it's not the house that makes my chest tight. It's the lineup of vehicles in the circular driveway that tells me exactly who's already here and ready to pass judgment. David's midnight blue BMW X7 gleams under the decorative Christmas lights strung along the roofline. $45,000 of German engineering that he bought the moment he became a partner at his Manhattan law firm. Next to it sits Jessica's white Porsche Cayenne, the SUV she insisted was practical for her marketing career but really bought because it screams success loud enough for the neighbors to hear. And there's Brad's Mercedes G-Wagon, all sharp angles and aggressive styling, perfect for a man who thinks subtlety is a character flaw. Then there's my Honda Civic, about to join this automotive parade, like a folk singer at a heavy metal concert. I'll call you later tonight, okay? I tell Sophie, pulling up behind the Mercedes. Time to face the music. Good luck, babe. Remember, you're worth more than all their cars combined. Literally. If only they knew that was actually true. I turn off the engine and sit in the sudden silence, watching Christmas lights twinkle across the front of the house where I grew up, feeling like I never quite belonged. Through the tall windows, I can see silhouettes moving around inside. David probably regaled everyone with stories from his latest corporate case. Jessica showing off photos from her recent campaign for some luxury brand. Brad discusses whatever investment bankers discuss when they want to sound important. And then there will be the questions about me, about why I still drive this car, about when I'm going to get serious about my career, about why I can't be more like my successful siblings. My mind drifts back 5 years to Christmas 2019, the last time Grandpa Bob was alive to celebrate with us. He'd pulled me aside in his garage that day away from the family chaos, and we'd worked together on his prized 1967 Porsche 911S. His hands, weathered from decades of working on engines, guided mine as we adjusted the carburetor. True worth isn't about what others see. Katie, he'd said, using the nickname only he was allowed to use. It's about what you build when no one's watching. Your father builds buildings because he needs everyone to see how successful he is, but you build things that matter. Don't ever let them convince you otherwise. I'd treasured those words, even more so after he passed away just 3 months later. What I hadn't known then was that he'd left me something that would change everything. Something that would prove his faith in me was more than just the blind love of a doting grandfather. My phone buzzes with a text from Sophie. I glance down to see her message the calm before the storm. I smile despite my nerves and type back the same words. She knows me too well. Complete silence settles over the driveway like fresh snow. My family stands frozen in their pajamas and bathrobes, their faces cycling through expressions I've never seen before. Confusion, disbelief, something that might be awe. Even the neighbors have stopped their whispering, phones still raised but forgotten in their hands. My father's mouth opens and closes like a fish pulled from water. Caitlin, what is this? His voice cracks on my name. Did you rent these? Are you in some kind of financial trouble? I almost laugh at the irony. In his mind, the only explanation for this display is desperation, some elaborate charade born from the same failure he announced to a room full of people last night. He cannot conceive that his disappointing daughter might actually own what stands before him. I walk slowly among the vehicles, Frank falling into step beside me, handing me keys as we move. Each car represents something deeper than metal and horsepower. The 1967 Porsche 911S, positioned at the front like a general leading troops, carries Grandpa Bob's fingerprints in every perfectly restored detail. We spent 3 summers bringing this car back to life, his weathered hands teaching mine the difference between fixing something and honoring it. This was his I tell my father, running my hand along the Porsche's iconic silhouette. We restored it together. He taught me that some things are worth preserving not because they're expensive, but because they represent something timeless. Richard stares at this car like it's speaking a foreign language. He remembers Grandpa Bob's garage, the hours I spent there instead of at tennis lessons or cotillion classes. He'd always assumed it was just an old man indulging a strange granddaughter. I moved to the McLaren 720S Spider, its carbon fiber body gleaming like liquid obsidian in the morning light. This one represents engineering precision. 710 horsepower channeled through systems so advanced they feel like magic. I appreciate the human ingenuity it took to create something this perfect. Jessica's voice comes out as barely a whisper. But you drive a Honda to family dinners. I drive what serves my purpose. I meet her eyes, seeing my own reflection in her shocked expression. This collection serves a different purpose entirely. The Ferrari F8 Tributo draws my attention next, its Rosso Corsa paint job catching the December sun like liquid fire. I bought this one to celebrate my 30th birthday. A gift to myself after my angel investments passed the $35 million mark. David makes a choking sound. 35 million, Frank steps forward, his professional demeanor cutting through the family drama like a knife through silk. Ms. Sullivan is one of our most valued clients. Her collection is appraised at $12 million. She's also connected several Silicon Valley executives with rare acquisitions through our concierge service. The numbers hang in the air like smoke from an explosion. I watch my father's face as he processes what Frank just said, see the exact moment when the mathematics become impossible to ignore. $12 million in cars alone. My father's entire real estate empire built over 30 years is worth $15 million, but I'm not done. I pull out my phone, opening the Charles Schwab app that tracks my portfolio in real time. The numbers glow on the screen like digital fire. CloudSync Technologies sale documentation dated March 15, 2021. Microsoft Corporation, $50 million. My current investment portfolio, $35.7 million. Real estate holdings, $8.2 million. David stumbles forward, his face the color of old parchment. $50 million. You sold your company for $50 million 3 years ago. I've been building wealth since then, not just maintaining it. The words drop into the silence like stones into deep water. My siblings exchange glances, suddenly understanding that every assumption they've made about my life has been catastrophically wrong. Their baby sister, the family disappointment, the one who embarrasses their father in public, is worth more than all of them combined. Richard reaches for the nearest car, a stunning Aston Martin DB11, his hand trembling as he grips the mirror for support. The color drains from his face as the full scope of his miscalculation becomes clear. This isn't about the cars, though they're magnificent. This isn't even about the money, though. There's more than he ever imagined. This is about the complete inversion of everything he believed about success, about worth, about his own children. I've spent 3 years watching you measure my value by external markers, while I built something you couldn't see. I keep my voice steady, though my heart pounds with a mixture of triumph and something that might be grief. You were so busy being embarrassed by my Honda that you never asked what else I might be driving. Brad, who hasn't spoken since emerging from the house, walks slowly around the McLaren, his investment banker's mind clearly running calculations. The insurance alone on this collection must cost more than most people's salaries. My mother appears on the front steps, still in her silk robe, her perfect composure finally cracking. "Caitlin, honey, why didn't you tell us because you never asked what I was building? You only cared about what I was displaying." Frank checks his watch, then addresses the growing crowd of neighbors. "Ladies and gentlemen, if you'll excuse us, we have documentation to complete. The vehicles need to be properly positioned and secured, but none of my family moves. They stand among millions of dollars worth of automotive art, finally seeing their daughter and sister not as she appeared to be, but as she actually is, the successful entrepreneur, the angel investor, the woman who built an empire while they were busy pitying her small apartment and practical car. The mathematical impossibility has become mathematical reality, and everything they thought they knew about success and failure lies in ruins at their feet." Emma breaks the spell, running between the cars with pure joy, her young voice cutting through the adult shock. "Aunt Katie, they're even more beautiful than you promised. Can you really tell me all their stories?" "Yes, sweetheart." I kneel down to her level, the only family member whose love never came with conditions, every single one. As Emma runs her small hands along the Ferrari's curves with the reverence of someone touching a piece of art, I notice Sophie positioning herself discreetly near the property line, her camera capturing not just the cars, but the raw human drama unfolding around them. She catches my eye and nods almost imperceptibly. This moment, this complete upending of family mythology, will be documented for posterity. My father finally finds his voice again, though it comes out strangled and unfamiliar. "The Honda. Why do you still drive that Honda if you can afford all this? Because the Honda gets me where I need to go without making a statement about who I am. I gesture to the collection surrounding us. These make a different kind of statement entirely. They're investments, passion projects, pieces of automotive history. But they're not my identity. David runs his hands through his hair, still processing. All those family dinners where we talked about your future, your career prospects. You just sat there and let us think. I let you think what you wanted to think. I never lied to anyone. When you asked about my work, I told you I was angel investing. When you asked about my apartment, I said it met my needs. None of you bothered to dig deeper because you'd already decided what my answers meant. The harsh truth of it settles over them like morning frost. They'd constructed an entire narrative about my life based on surface observations, never once considering that I might be choosing simplicity over showiness, substance over spectacle. Jessica takes a shaky step toward the Lamborghini Huracan S-Tow, its aggressive styling seeming to mirror her own internal turbulence. 3 years, she whispers. You've been sitting at our dinner table for 3 years, letting Dad talk about your lack of direction, letting us all assume you needed help. I wasn't ready to share this part of my life. And honestly, after last night's performance, I can see why I wasn't. The reference to my father's public humiliation lands like a physical blow. He visibly flinches, finally understanding that his words have consequences beyond the momentary satisfaction of putting someone in their place. The crowd of neighbors continues to grow, transforming my family's private crisis into Greenwich's most documented Boxing Day spectacle. Phone cameras click and record from behind manicured hedges while someone's teenage daughter live streams the entire scene to her TikTok followers. I can already imagine the headlines spreading across social media. Mystery car collection appears in Greenwich. Silicon Valley tech mogul revealed as local resident. My father stands among the automotive evidence of his massive miscalculation, still struggling to process the paradigm shift happening in real time. His most successful child, the one worth more than his entire business empire, is the same daughter he publicly humiliated 12 hours ago. The mathematics of it seem to break something fundamental in his worldview. Why hide this from us? His voice carries a defensive edge, the tone of someone trying to maintain control in a situation that spiraled completely beyond his influence. Why let us think you were struggling? Because I wanted you to love me for who I am, not what I own. The words come out steadier than I feel, but you've made it clear that's impossible. Your love comes with performance requirements I never agreed to meet. David processes this revelation differently than Jessica, his professional jealousy manifesting as intellectual outrage rather than social embarrassment. So you've been lying about your success for 3 years. His attorney training kicks in, looking for deception where none exists. I've been protecting myself from exactly this reaction. I gesture around us, taking in the cameras, the shocked faces, the complete breakdown of family privacy, making everything about money and status instead of relationships and respect. Jessica's response comes from a different wound entirely. Her social insecurity, her need to maintain appearances among her luxury marketing colleagues, makes her focus on the missed opportunities. Do you know how many networking events I could have invited you to? How many connections could I have made for you? I didn't need your connections. I built my own. The truth of it lands like a slap. While they were all busy managing their images and climbing social ladders, I was creating value from nothing, building companies and accumulating wealth through innovation rather than networking. My mother finally speaks, her voice breaking as she steps off the front porch. We just wanted to motivate you to achieve more. Her tears are real, the pain genuine, but the logic behind it reveals everything wrong with our family dynamic. You wanted to shame me into conforming. There's a difference between motivation and humiliation, Mom. What Dad said last night wasn't designed to help me succeed. It was designed to put me in my place. The memory of his toast burns between us, those cruel words about being too poor to ever be a partner in his company. He thought he was teaching me a lesson about ambition. Instead, he was revealing the conditional nature of his love. A familiar voice cuts through the family tension, and I turn to see Sophie approaching with her professional camera and press credentials. She introduces herself to the gathering crowd with the smooth confidence of someone accustomed to documenting Silicon Valley drama. I'm Sophie Chen from Auto Week magazine. I'm working on a feature about successful women who choose discretion over display. Miss Sullivan agreed to be interviewed about the psychology of private wealth. Jessica's eyes widen with recognition, her marketing background immediately processing the implications. You're Sophie Chen. I've read your Silicon Valley profiles. Your piece on female angel investors was brilliant. Sophie smiles professionally, but I catch the warmth in her eyes when she looks at me. The article focuses on women who've achieved significant financial success while maintaining deliberately modest public personas. Caitlin represents a fascinating case study in authentic wealth versus performed success. Frank Romano, who's been quietly documenting the delivery process, steps forward to add professional context. She doesn't just collect these vehicles as trophies. She understands every engine specification, restoration requirement, and market trend. This isn't a rich person's hobby collecting. This is passionate expertise combined with serious investment acumen. As if summoned by this mention of expertise, Emma breaks free from the adult drama and runs straight to me, wrapping her small arms around my waist. "I knew you had secrets, Aunt Katie. Good ones." Her 8-year-old wisdom cuts through the complexity like a knife through silk. The contrast is stark and heartbreaking. The only family member who loves me unconditionally is too young to understand stock portfolios or real estate holdings. She loves me because I listen to her stories, remember her favorite things, and treat her like a complete person rather than a reflection of adult success. David kneels beside a vintage Porsche 911 Turbo, running his hands along its pristine paint job. This one alone is probably worth more than my partnership buy-in at the firm. More actually, that's a 1975 Turbo Carrera. Only 284 were made for the U.S. market. I paid $650,000 for it at an auction last year. The number drops into the conversation like a stone into still water. My brother, who earns high six figures as a partner at one of Manhattan's most prestigious law firms, is looking at a single car that costs more than his annual salary. My father moves from vehicle to vehicle like a man in a trance, reading VIN numbers and registration documents that all bear my name. His brain seems to be attempting some impossible calculation, trying to reconcile the daughter he dismissed with the woman who accumulated this level of wealth while he wasn't paying attention. Sophie positions herself to capture not just the cars, but the human reactions, the exact moment when a family's entire narrative about success and failure rewrites itself in real time. This story will document more than just my collection. It will explore what happens when love becomes conditional on performance, when family members become strangers because they never bothered to look beyond surface assumptions. The morning sun climbs higher, casting sharp shadows between the vehicles, and I realize we're past the point of no return. Everything that comes after this moment will be different. My family will never again be able to see me as their disappointing youngest child, and I'll never again be able to pretend that their approval matters more than my own self-worth. The transformation is mutual, irreversible, and absolutely necessary. The sound of more car engines draws our attention to the street, where a small convoy of luxury vehicles approaches. Frank checks his clipboard and nods with professional satisfaction. The second delivery right on schedule. 3 more transporters pull up, their hydraulic systems whining as they lower additional vehicles onto the already crowded driveway. A 1963 Ferrari 250 GT Lusso emerges first, its elegant curves representing the pinnacle of Italian design. Behind it comes a modern Ford GT, its carbon fiber body a testament to American engineering evolution. The final transport reveals a classic 1970 Plymouth Cuda, its muscular stance and plum-crazy purple paint job commanding immediate attention. My father's legs seem to give out slightly, and he reaches for the nearest car to steady himself. 26 vehicles. He counts them like a man calculating his own defeat. 26 vehicles that probably cost more than everything I own combined. Frank approaches with the final set of keys and documentation. This completes the collection transfer, Ms. Sullivan. Everything's been positioned according to your specifications. The insurance documentation and registration transfers are in the folder. I accept the folder, feeling its weight not just in paper but in symbolism. This isn't just about cars or money anymore. This is about the complete inversion of power dynamics that have defined our family for 3 decades. Brad, who's remained mostly silent throughout this revelation, finally speaks up. His investment banker's mind is clearly running calculations that don't add up to his preconceptions. Caitlin, the annual insurance on this collection alone must be more than most people's mortgages. Probably I agree. But when you love something enough to invest in it properly, you protect it properly too. The statement hangs in the air, applicable to cars but unmistakably about something larger. About relationships, about family, about the difference between loving someone and controlling them. Sophie steps closer, her professional demeanor softening into something more personal. This is exactly why your story matters. You've redefined success on your own terms while everyone else was busy defining it for you. By mid-afternoon, the crowds have dispersed and the media circus has moved on to other Greenwich scandals. The extended family members have returned to their own homes, armed with enough gossip to fuel months of dinner party conversations. What remains is the core of our dysfunction, my parents, my siblings, and me, standing among 26 vehicles that have fundamentally altered the trajectory of our relationships. My father approaches Grandpa Bob's restored Porsche with something approaching reverence, running his fingers along the chrome bumper like he's touching a piece of family history he never understood. Tell me about your grandfather's role in all this. The question opens a door I've kept locked for 5 years. Grandpa Bob left me more than money. He left me a blueprint for living authentically. His will included a letter with specific instructions: build something, meaningful, not flashy. He encouraged my interest in technology when you dismissed it as not real business. Richard flinches at the reference to his past dismissals, but I continue. He saw potential in me that you couldn't see because you were too focused on controlling how that potential should manifest. He understood that success doesn't require an audience to be real. The emotional core of our family's dysfunction spills out like water from a broken dam. Every holiday felt like a performance review where I always failed. Every family gathering became an exercise in measuring my worth against external markers that meant nothing to me. I found peace by choosing different values entirely. My mother sits on the front steps, her perfect composure finally cracking completely. We thought we were helping you, honey. We thought we were motivating you to want more. You were teaching me to be ashamed of myself unless I met your approval requirements. There's a difference between encouragement and emotional manipulation. Frank, who's been quietly organizing paperwork, offers professional context that cuts through our family drama. True automotive collecting isn't about showing off wealth. Caitlin understands restoration history, engineering innovations, market dynamics. She's built this collection based on passionate expertise, not social status. Most collectors buy cars to impress other people. She bought them because she genuinely appreciates what they represent. Sophie steps closer, her journalist persona giving way to something more personal. She and I met through my work, not through chance. I was researching successful women who choose discretion over display, and Frank connected us, thinking she might have insights into that psychology. She pauses, looking at me with an expression that makes my chest warm despite the family tension surrounding us. I fell for the woman who drove a Honda to our first date and spent 2 hours explaining why she chose it over flashier options. Not someone trying to impress me with what she owned, but someone who understood the difference between transportation and demonstration. The revelation that Sophie and I are together adds another layer of complexity to an already overwhelming day. Jessica's eyes widen as she processes this information alongside everything else she's learned about my hidden life. David finds his voice first, his legal training helping him articulate what he's feeling. Your success makes my partnership seem small, Caitlin. I've been so proud of making partner at Cravath, and now I find out my baby sister sold a company for more money than I'll make in my entire career. His honesty is unexpected and somehow more painful than his earlier anger. I never wanted to diminish your achievements, David. Your success is real and meaningful regardless of the numbers involved. Jessica's apology comes from a different wound entirely. I've been so focused on appearances, on maintaining the right image for my marketing career, that I forgot about substance entirely. I projected my own insecurities onto you, assuming you were struggling because you weren't performing success the way I thought you should. My mother speaks through tears, her voice barely audible. I enabled your father's controlling behavior because I was afraid of conflict. I sacrificed your emotional well-being to keep peace in the marriage. I'm so sorry, sweetheart. The apologies feel genuine, but they also feel insufficient somehow. 30 years of conditional love can't be erased by a single conversation, no matter how honest or heartfelt. My father has remained silent throughout these exchanges, moving slowly among the cars like a man touring the ruins of his own certainties. When he finally speaks, his voice carries a vulnerability I've never heard before. I built everything from nothing, Caitlin. Dropped out of high school to work construction. Spent 20 years clawing my way up from day laborer to business owner. I thought success had to be visible or it wasn't real. I measured everything by external validation because that's how I learned to survive. He stops beside the McLaren, its carbon fiber surface reflecting his weathered face like a funhouse mirror. I demanded conformity from you because I was terrified of losing control. If you succeeded in ways I didn't understand, it meant my entire worldview might be wrong. The admission hangs in the air between us, heavy with decades of misunderstanding and missed connections. This is the closest he's ever come to acknowledging that his love came with conditions, that his approval was contingent on my willingness to validate his choices by making similar ones. Emma appears at my elbow, having observed the adult drama with the serious attention that children bring to things they don't fully understand. Aunt Katie, are you and your family okay now? The question, innocent and direct, cuts through our complex emotional processing with surgical precision. Are we okay? Can 30 years of dysfunction be resolved by a single morning of revelation? Can love be unconditional after it's been conditional for so long? I kneel down to Emma's level, looking into her earnest 8-year-old face. We're working on being okay, sweetheart. Sometimes grown-ups have to learn how to love each other better. She nods solemnly as if this makes perfect sense to her young mind. Can I sit in one of the pretty cars while you figure it out? The request makes me laugh for the first time all day, a genuine sound that seems to ease some of the tension crackling between the adults. Of course you can. Which one do you want to try first? As Emma deliberates between vehicles with the serious consideration of a museum curator, I realize that regardless of what happens with the rest of my family, this moment matters. This little girl loves me without conditions, without requirements, without needing me to prove my worth through external achievements. Maybe that's where healing begins. Not with grand gestures or expensive revelations, but with the simple recognition that love should never require performance. New Year's Eve 2024 arrives with a transformation so complete it feels like we're living in an alternate reality. The same dining room where my father publicly humiliated me 6 days ago now hosts a celebration where he proudly introduces me to his business associates as his daughter, the tech entrepreneur. The shift is so dramatic it almost feels performative, but I catch genuine pride in his voice when he describes CloudSync's acquisition to Robert Whitman. She built something revolutionary, he tells the gathered guests, his chest puffed with paternal satisfaction that would have meant everything to me 5 years ago. Microsoft saw the same potential I always knew was there. The revisionist history stings a little, but I understand it's his way of processing the paradigm shift. People need narratives that make sense of their world, even if those narratives require editing the past to fit the present. David approaches me during cocktails, his usual competitive edge replaced by something resembling humility. I've been thinking about what you said about angel investing. My firm represents several startups, and I'd love to get your perspective on which ones might be worth backing. Jessica's transformation is equally striking. She corners me near the champagne table with entrepreneurial excitement that reminds me of my own early days building CloudSync. I've been developing a concept for sustainable luxury marketing, focusing on brands that prioritize substance over flash. Would you consider advising the project? Their requests feel genuine, born from respect rather than obligation. For the first time in my life, my siblings are seeking my guidance instead of offering theirs. Despite the family's newfound appreciation for my success, I've maintained the core values that built it. I still drive the Honda for daily errands, still live in my modest Stamford apartment, and still choose investments based on meaningful impact rather than maximum returns. But now I share my victories with people who finally understand why those choices matter. Emma has become my most enthusiastic protege. She spends hours in Grandpa Bob's garage, now converted into a proper workspace, learning the same lessons about engines and engineering that shaped my understanding of how things work. Yesterday, she helped me wash the 1967 Porsche, her small hands carefully soaping the chrome bumpers while I explained how internal combustion engines transform energy into motion. Aunt Katie, she said, studying the engine bay with 8-year-old intensity. Grandpa Bob taught you all this stuff when you were little, right? And now you're teaching me? That's how knowledge works, sweetheart. It passes from one generation to the next, getting stronger each time. The establishment of the Sullivan Family Foundation represents our biggest collective step forward. I've committed $15 million to fund education and entrepreneurship, programs for underprivileged youth, with my father contributing his real estate expertise to help establish physical locations for our initiatives. David handles the legal framework, Jessica manages our public relations, and my mother coordinates volunteer efforts. For the first time in our family's history, we're building something together instead of competing against each other. Sophie's article published in Auto Week 3 weeks ago, titled "The Woman Who Collected Cars While Everyone Thought She Collected Problems," captured not just my story but the broader phenomenon of successful women who choose discretion over display. The response has been overwhelming, with interview requests from major business publications and speaking opportunities at entrepreneurship conferences. Our relationship went public with that article, and the response from both our families has been uniformly positive. Sophie's parents, both university professors, appreciate her choice of a partner who values substance over surface. My family, still adjusting to their recalibrated understanding of my life, welcomes her with enthusiasm that feels genuine rather than performative. But perhaps the biggest surprise came last week when I announced my latest venture. I'm launching an AI platform called Restoration IQ that uses machine learning to document and preserve automotive restoration knowledge. The system will catalog techniques, part specifications, and historical data to help future generations maintain classic vehicles properly. $20 million in Series A funding, secured before the official announcement. The investors include several Silicon Valley luminaries who understand the intersection of technology and passion. My family's reaction to this news provided the clearest measure of how much our dynamic has changed. Instead of doubt or dismissal, David immediately offered legal support. Jessica suggested marketing strategies that leverage automotive culture's social media presence. My father, amazingly, asked thoughtful questions about the business model and scalability challenges. No one questioned my capability or commitment. No one suggested I might be overreaching or unprepared. They treated me like the successful entrepreneur I've always been, offering support instead of skepticism. As midnight approaches and champagne glasses rise in toast to 2025, I find myself thinking about the year ahead. Christmas 2025 feels like both a destination and a promise. I imagine Emma a year older and wiser, working alongside me in the garage where Grandpa Bob first taught me that true worth doesn't need an audience. I picture my father supporting Emma's interests, regardless of whether they align with his preferences, breaking the generational cycle of demanding conformity that nearly broke us apart. I see my family gathered not to perform success for each other, but to celebrate the authentic achievements we've each accomplished in our own ways. The countdown begins, voices joining together as we mark the transition from a year of revelation to a year of possibility. As the clock strikes 12 and 2025 officially begins, I realize that the greatest gift isn't the wealth I've accumulated or the recognition I've finally received. It's the freedom to be authentically myself in the presence of people who love me not despite my choices but because of them. The quiet ones, it turns out, don't always stay quiet forever. Sometimes we just wait for the right moment to let our actions speak louder than anyone else's words ever could. If you enjoyed this story of family forgiveness and finding your true worth, subscribe for more real-life drama proving sometimes the quiet ones have the biggest surprises. What family secret would shock your relatives the most? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and remember that success looks different for everyone. Sometimes the most powerful victories are the ones nobody sees coming. The following morning, January 1st, 2025, I woke up in my childhood bedroom for the first time in years. Not because I had to stay, but because I wanted to. The house feels different now, less like a museum of expectations and more like a home where I'm genuinely welcome. I find my father in the garage, standing beside Grandpa Bob's workbench with a cup of coffee and an expression I've never seen before. He's studying the tools hanging on their pegboard, each one placed exactly where Bob left them 5 years ago. I kept everything the way he had it, he says, without looking at me. I thought maybe someday you'd want to use this space again. The admission surprises me. Through all the years of dismissing my automotive interests, he'd preserved the one place where those interests were nurtured and celebrated, even when he couldn't understand my choices. Some part of him had protected the foundation they were built on. Emma bounds into the garage wearing the child-sized coveralls I bought her for Christmas, carrying a small wrench set with her name engraved on the case. She's ready for her first real engine lesson, her enthusiasm infectious and pure. As I watch her examine the Porsche's engine bay with the same wonder I felt 30 years ago, I realize that this moment represents more than personal vindication or family reconciliation. It's about breaking cycles that have defined generations of Sullivans, replacing conditional love with unconditional support, trading performance requirements for authentic acceptance. My father kneels beside Emma, pointing out different engine components with genuine interest, rather than obligation. For the first time in my memory, he's encouraging curiosity rather than conformity, fostering passion rather than demanding practicality. This is how change happens, I think. Not through dramatic revelations or expensive displays, but through quiet moments where love becomes unconditional and acceptance becomes authentic, where families learn to celebrate differences instead of demanding uniformity. 1 year later, the garage smells like motor oil and hot chocolate, an unlikely combination that somehow feels perfectly right. Emma, now 9 and infinitely wiser about carburetors and compression ratios, sits behind the wheel of Grandpa Bob's Porsche while I guide her hands on the steering wheel. She's not actually driving, of course. but she's learning the weight of responsibility that comes with controlling something powerful and precious. The same lesson Bob taught me 25 years ago, the same one I'm teaching her now. My father watches from the doorway, his coffee mug steaming in the December air. 6 months ago, he surprised everyone by selling Sullivan Real Estate to focus full-time on our family foundation. The man who once measured success by visible wealth now finds meaning in invisible impact. David and Jessica arrive with their families, no longer competitors in a game none of us wanted to play. We're partners now in business and in life, bound together by shared purpose rather than shared genetics. Restoration IQ launches nationwide next month, with pre-orders exceeding every projection. Sophie's documentary about our story premieres on Netflix in February. The Sullivan Family Foundation has funded its first scholarship recipients. But right now, in this moment, none of that matters as much as teaching a little girl that some lessons transcend generations, that love doesn't require performance, and that sometimes the most important things we build are relationships. Emma looks up at me with Bob's eyes and her own infinite curiosity. Ready for the next lesson, Aunt Katie? Always, sweetheart. Always.